I want to just riff maybe for like 8 to 10 minutes on the response to Michelin.
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't have this in our notes. I forgot to add it in, but was reading about it this morning. I just want to do some off the cuff chat real quick.
Sure, sure.
So you had the reaction podcast. Obviously, there was a ton of reaction. My view, and you let me know if you agree with this, was that some chefs in some of the smaller markets kind of felt underwhelmed at the amount of stars they've gotten. And there was a post by Drew the Food Guy on Instagram. They kind of want to read some parts. I'll summarize some stuff because it's quite long, and I definitely suggest reading it out. But I just kind of wanted to like share what he shared, and maybe get your reaction to it because I kind of was aligned with a lot of what he said. So he says that predictions were way off. Outrage didn't make sense. People were shocked when truly great restaurants earned stars, and equally shocked when pretty good places didn't. It's not that Dallas doesn't care about food. We're just new to Michelin's framework, and the way we're talking about the guide makes that clear. He goes on to say. Michelin stars are based on these 5 criteria, and he gives it. And I think one thing is like consistency. So there's no weak dishes, there's no dips in execution, there's no hero dish carrying the meal. I think maybe looking back, maybe Alinea maybe suffered from that a little bit on the hero reliance on hero dishes. So he goes on to say that Michelin stars aren't based on many of the things diners often focus on, and I thought this was a key point. And he goes on to list the decor, the room or ambiance, the service style, friendliness of staff, portion sizes, trendiness, and wine programs. I would disagree maybe on service a little bit. We can save that for another day. He says they evaluate on what's happening on the plate, the technique, flavor, identity, and consistency. Those things help shape the experience, but they're not a part of the criteria that the Michelin has laid out for earning a star. So then he just goes on to say that the fact that so many Dallas diners couldn't look at this restaurant and immediately recognize its level, it was Mamani in Dallas, says something important. It shows that we're not used to evaluating technique. We're not used to menus with 0 weak points. We confuse I prefer with this is better. We judge restaurants by comfort, portions, and vibes. We haven't built the reference points that cities with long fine dining histories have. We underestimate what true world-class cooking looks like up close. And he goes on to say about this restaurant, Mamani, that in terms of precision, discipline, structure, and execution, it's the best restaurant in Dallas right now. I'm not here to argue that. But he goes on to say, like, again, many Dallas diners evaluate restaurants based on vibes, service, decor, generosity, friendliness, portions, and price. Michelin evaluates on technique, execution, precision, flavor clarity, menu coherence, and consistency. 2 completely different languages. And so Michelin is human. It's the most structured, calibrated, globally consistent evaluation system we have. You don't have to love Michelin, but understanding it is essential if you're going to critique it. I thought it was a good point. I think what I take away from this is like, I saw this with the Philly list. I think only 3 restaurants received a star. And I had seen, and I have friends in Philly where they said we had seen all these articles on this place is a 2-star, and maybe they could even be a 3-star, and a bunch of these places are going to get 1 star. You saw it in Boston too. It's like all these places where like the influencers went and media darlings and all this stuff. And the Michelin comes out, and it's like, Philly, you get 3 1-star restaurants. In Dallas, you don't get everything. You don't get to have everything you want to have a star. And diners are left very confused, especially in these cities with rising food repertoire. I think I look at Buffalo. It's a perfect example. I don't know that Michelin will ever go there, but there's so many restaurants there that people love and crave and are delicious. But it's hard to figure out whatever any of them ever even be considered a Michelin star restaurant. There are a couple maybe that could get 1 or a bit gourmand. There are some fine dining hitters, or there's some experiences, but just because a restaurant is like beloved doesn't mean it gets rated on Michelin. And so I just kind of wanted your thoughts, if you had any, on like the backlash, but the response, because I saw a lot of it in light of this, and it felt like a very like response heavy Michelin guide rollout this year. So your thoughts?
I think you covered the guest side really well, talking about why maybe people are disappointed or they thought that their beloved place that they've been either going to for years or their cousin works at or whatever should have maybe gotten a star. We can pontificate on that all day long. I'm going to take it in a different direction that might maybe overlap or provide value to the person who dines out a lot, who might be listening to the show, or even if you're early on in your career and you're kind of thinking about Michelin restaurants as appealing, a step that you want to take, a season that you want to spend in your career. So I often get messages from people who are just like so taken aback by their first experience in a Michelin kitchen. It is different. Ray and I have both spent time in Michelin restaurants. I have worked certainly on the 3-star level, and then gone to places that didn't have 3 stars, and then gone to places who were just totally casual. So like my experience runs the full gamut. And I think you would be maybe doing a disservice to somebody if you're saying that somebody who works at a quote unquote 3-star level then goes to the next place in a not Michelin represented city and carries every single thing about that operation into their new concept. Because typically what you see is steps get, cut out, or you want to save time, or you don't actually want to be like that run ragged in the way that you're kind of like paying attention to all of the details and cleanliness standards. And like, I'm not saying people that don't run Michelin kitchens run slop houses. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot that you need to, I would argue, sacrifice. Like there's a lot of stuff that you sacrifice in effort when you're in a, especially 3 Michelin starred kitchen. That just seems like,
Can we
go
put a
ahead.
bullet point in that? Save your thought because I want you to continue on it. But I just had a question because I saw
Go
this
ahead.
a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, especially on the Linea conversation, there's a lot of like, oh, well, this person only like worked at a Linea. So like, of
Fair.
course they weren't able to like adapt. I kind
Right.
of like was a little confused by that because if your goal is to be working at the best restaurant and you get a job there and you rise up there, like, how is that a fault of that person to
Mm.
like be there? I just kind of, you're that I've seen that as well. It's adjacent to what you
Yeah.
just said.
Yeah. And it's like, if you're gonna go for, again, I'm gonna make this really concrete because I feel like I'm talking in like too high up in the clouds here. If you worked at a 2 Michelin star restaurant in New York and you decide that you grew up in Boston, your family's in Boston, you want to like, again, have lower cost of living, the stuff that I talked about in the last episode, a little bit of a slower pace, less traffic, and you go to Boston. It's like, are you going to exactly copy and paste that 2 Michelin star restaurant in Boston? I would argue that you're not. And I certainly came to Seattle in the, what was it, 8 years ago that I came here, because I didn't want to pursue stars. I was like, I've done the Michelin thing. I just want to like build a really profitable business. That was kind of like my goal. And then I ran into this frustration when I was doing pop-up dinners where I was like, well, shoot, man. Like, and I worked with people here in Seattle who were like ex-Michelin people, and they would sing their frustrations to me. And I was like, and we saw this recently with the head chef of Canlis. I'm going to cover Canlis later on in the show, which is like one of the fine dining restaurants here in Seattle. Be frustrated at the fact that she goes through all of this toil and effort and she can't get a star because Seattle doesn't have a Michelin restaurant representation here. And so that was my common criticism that I would sing, as I would be like, what's the best thing that's going to happen if you create a really, really awesome fine dining restaurant here in Seattle? You're going to get your James Beard. Seattle Times is going to write something really nice about you. And then it's like, what is going to continue to keep you going year after year after year? Because as we're talking about, if these businesses are not hyper profitable, again, you could pivot and maybe like argue that you make it that way. I just kind of like, as much as we can badmouth Michelin in certain ways about the way that they operate or the way that they choose restaurants or don't choose restaurants, there is a motivation factor there that serves as a North Star for a lot of chefs. And that's what keeps them going. You see it in the way that they post about it on Instagram. Like, you have restaurants who don't post for months at a time, and then the Michelin Guide comes out and all of a sudden they're going to break their quote unquote streak of not posting stuff to literally say, thank you for allowing us to retain this star. Because they probably see a direct correlation between them having that award, them having that standing, and guests choosing them over the competitor down the street. Like, it really like cuts through the noise. And then the important thing that I've certainly experienced in Seattle is it reflects in the talent that you attract. Because you hear Ray and I talk about when we came out of culinary school, we wanted to go into Michelin-starred fine dining places. It's like you basically cut yourself off at the knees to potential graduates or people getting into the industry, even if they didn't go to culinary school, because it's like, if you're young and hungry and able-bodied, and again, like you can work a 12-hour day and bounce back and show up for the next 4 days of the work week, it's like you're going to go work in a fine dining kitchen.
But
and
it's
so
also
when you
just,
don't,
like,
yeah,
this the level of talent you attract. Not that I'm like, I hate calling this a level of talent, but like, I came to Chicago to stage in a Michelin restaurant. I live here now working as a food development chef for a food manufacturing company. Like, and they're two
yes,
completely different things. It's like, but because
totally.
Chicago, and something in my mind was like, Michelin, Chicago food, good opportunities. I want to be in the Chicago region and work.
Totally. And
It's
so
like,
all of those things are like flow-on effects of a Michelin representation in a city. And so I basically say this to say, don't be disappointed in a Dallas or a Boston or a Philly or even like a Denver or a Vancouver when they got their Michelin guide finally. When we're looking around and we're saying, where are all of the, like heavy hitters here? Because they were not incentivized to behave in that way. Now that there is a carrot dangled in front of those teams and those chefs, the ones that do want that, they're going to change the way that they operate. They're going to, and then again, we saw this with Wolf's Taylor in Denver. It's like they leveled up and now it's all of a sudden they're getting recognized for it. Talking about Emeralds, it's like EJ and that team leveled up and now all of a sudden like they are getting rewarded for it and it becomes a flywheel situation for that organization. And so it's almost like don't be upset that the flywheel isn't working when one part of the machine is not there. It's non-existent, right? So it's like you can get upset that all this effort gets poured in from the chef and the team and the vision and the room and the budget being spent, but then there's no reinforcement mechanism in Michelin to communicate to guests that this is worth going to. And so of course you're not going to experience a flywheel. Like to me, it's so obvious. And again, like because I had to live this out firsthand, it just seems particularly palpable for me. But then again, people are having to see this play out in their city. And again, I'm not saying all of these places should go for Michelin stars or change their concept or transform their business into something they quote unquote hate. But I'm saying now for the chefs that do want it, it is available to you. I talked about opportunity being available in the last episode because I think that again, for the people who want it, it's there for the taking now.
and you articulated this well. I think a lot of people see Michelin as like a vanity thing. And it's not. I don't see it that way. But I think the one thing that you see now in a industry that's so competitive is like having Michelin star drives business, and
Yes.
it could be that. I think a lot of chefs maybe in these new cities were hoping for that because that helps them stand out against competition, helps them drive business. And at the risk of going too long, I have one more quick question on this. Is this what is your approach to the idea that I've seen some chefs kind of I don't say reprimand guests, but like to preach to guests or talk to guests and kind of like not full out blaming them, but semi blaming them or semi saying like you need to play as well if you want to see these things. What are your thoughts on that? Because like you see a place like EJ's in Emeralds, like he revamped it, but like the core like Emeralds experience, it's just modernized, right? So I don't know. I kind of felt a little weird about some of the like putting it back on the guests or customers of some of these cities where it's like it's kind of your job to kind of gauge on what customers or guests want and go from there. And then that's kind of where Michelin fits in. Any thoughts on the turning it back towards the customers?
I think if guests knew exactly what they wanted, we wouldn't need a Michelin guide. Like there would be this direct relationship you could have with people where they would tell you what they want, they would tell you what's good and what's not. They would be the arbiters of quote unquote criticism and all of that. But that's not what we see. And so the reason Michelin has just a reason to exist is because it is this like we go to all the places. Not only that, but we go multiple times. Not only that, but we send people who know what they're talking about in our inspectors going to those places. And then I've talked about this before, we basically make a tier list in 3 Michelin stars, 2 Michelin stars, 1 Michelin stars, in the same way that you'll see video game rankings doing, S tier, A tier, B tier. And so that gives people a very clear framework for like what is good and how I can, decide when my wife and I are going to go for our anniversary, what type of place should we go based on the amount of money that we want to spend and the experience that we want to have. And so I sometimes think that it is this paradox where you can certainly have cities that have a very well-versed dining population. We see this in a city like Chicago. I talked about the different genres, quote unquote, of restaurants that have been able to achieve 3 Michelin stars in Chicago, going on the classic French side to the crazy modernist side to now the, maybe a little bit more like close to nature way that John Shields and the team at Smith does it. And so, and I've had food experiences, Ray, I'm sure you have too in Chicago, that are just like across the board interesting. It's like people know Chicago for hot beef sandwiches and deep dish pizza, but it's like you can get great sushi in Chicago. Like, I grew up in the Midwest. It was not something that I, like, immediately thought of like, oh my goodness, I'm going to get really great fish here because I'm so far away from the coast. And so you sometimes see the backlash in other places where you can have a really talented chef go to an area, and because, again, I'm not trying to, again, this sounds elitist when I phrase it in this way, but like, guests don't get it because, again, it's like their experience is one type of restaurant or a level of execution in restaurants. I think I've gone on a rant previously about flying in airlines and the difference between like economy and business class and then first class. And the first time I experienced business class, I thought it was first class because it was like I was so far beyond my level of comprehension that there could be something better than, what I experienced in business class. And so that sometimes is something that guests experience. And again, with all of this stuff, Michelin has a long-term time horizon. I have on my bookshelf here the original 1909, I think it is. I think it's 1900 Michelin guide here, where it's like it's a long game that they're playing. And when they decide to go into a market, they're ideally looking to stay there for the long haul in a way that we've seen other lists and other places just totally buck, in a way that like World's 50 Best will give you number one and then you can't get number one again. And then you go into this different list. And so Michelin is thinking in a much longer term time horizon here. And I think people just need to come to terms with the fact that this stuff is going to take time. Because if you've ever worked in any of these environments, and we're like direct experience here, I remember some of those days when the chef that I was working for, we didn't have a star. Michelin came to the city, we had our inspection, and we didn't get a star. And I'm sitting across the table, and chef's like, we're going to try to go for the star. Things are going to change. And, like, that's how it typically happens. Again, if other people have stories around this happening, like, please send it to us in a DM or post it in a comment down below the video, because I just think that, like, seeing more of this stuff makes it so that as Michelin has been increasingly more keen on pulling the curtain back a little bit, because there is sometimes this disconnect with guests and guests don't get it, or guests think that it's all, again, how you're talking about it, Ray, a vanity thing. It's like people see that it actually matters. And so just all things that I think are important to discuss.
Thank you for riffing on that.